Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update. First part there, I'll review exclude my EU elections synopsis video. First part there are for the 10th of June 2024. Let's get straight to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. I just want to give a mathematical aside here. I was called out, rightly so. I had a bit of a light bulb moment on this. When I talk about the Ukrainians possibly, I'm throwing out a random number and say, possibly they're inflating their numbers by 30%. And I say, let's take the number 1,000. So 1,000 personnel. So they've inflated them by 30%. So let's take 30% off that. Or let's take 33.3%, so a third. Take a third off that, and you still get a high number, or whatever the claim is I normally make. But of course, in taking a third off that, that is not adding a third. So if you take a third off that, you get to 666. Right. So to get from 666 back to 1,000, it's not adding a third. A third of 666 is actually 222. It's adding 50%. So if you think of the 666 like 2/3 of the 1,000 where we started, take off a third, you get to 2/3 of that. To add back on up to the full 3/3, you have to add that 1/3 of the original, which is 50% of what you actually started with. So in other words, when I say if you take 30% off that or 33% off that, and that's still a huge number, in order for the Ukrainians to be inflating their figures, that taking a third off is an inflation of 50%. And of course, that's an incredibly large inflationary percentage. So when we take a third off, we're thinking in like 33%. And I say that's a phenomenally high number. That's like your highest number that I can imagine they're going to be consistently adding on by taking that off. But actually that represents a 50%, which is beyond the 30% I'm kind of talking about. So actually I need to scale back what I'm taking off to say that that's a ridiculously high number. So I'll probably scale back to 20 to 15%, because even if I take 20% off 1,000, that leaves you with 800. And to get from 800 up to 1,000, that's a quarter. So you've gone from 20 to 25%. So actually there's a 25% increase. So even if I say 20%, that really take 20% off represents 25% on, depending on what, where we are. But anyway, that's kind of a bit of a mathematical nugget there that someone pointed out to me, that it's like, oh yeah, of course. So when we look at these and say, well, it's another day of really high losses, 1,190 lost, actually to give a realistically large percentage of inflation, I would have to take sort of 15% off, right? And that's your large one. So yeah, I need to change my metrics there. So 10 tanks, so that is where we've seen it over the last couple of weeks, really. 1,190 coming down towards the 1,000 mark, but still an incredibly high number. 10 tanks is slightly over average for tanks, I think, but not as high as we have seen, but significant enough. 13 APVs, armored personnel vehicles, is lower than the average. 51 artillery systems is higher than the average. In fact, that's pretty much 3 times the average there. So that's a huge loss in that category. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. It depends what they are, particularly anti-aircraft warfare system. 56 vehicles and fuel tanks is a pretty high number there, and 14 pieces of special equipment to add to that. So that's high in that category. Fairly difficult day for the Russians. Again, it's what we are seeing on a daily basis. And then Andrew Perpetua here says, or here's his latest list of losses, and it is a bit closer to parity than we have seen. We've seen some incredibly bad days for the Russians. Here we have a 1.5, 2 to 1 maybe, Russian to Ukrainian losses, and there are a number of Starlinks on there for Russian losses, so you might want to take them off, in which case it gets closer to sort of 1.5 to 1. Right. Okay, let's look at the Ukrainian losses. There's an ANTPQ-36 radar. It's another radar that they've lost of that sort of ilk. We have some howitzers, including M777 damage. That's only damaged that radar, so that could be less problematic. We have an M1 Abrams damaged there. We come down to infantry fighting vehicles, another Bradley destroyed, BMP-2 captured. Now, I talked about how we're more likely to see Western vehicles in the Bradley and APC categories and probably tank categories going forward, because the Ukrainians will have cycled through their older equipment, rather like the Russians, talking about how their stockpiles change and what the loss list indicates tells us something about the state of play for the Russians, and talking about how they've cycled through X and Y. Well, it's the same for the Ukrainians here. That is, on the one hand, bad that they've cycled through a lot of equipment to get to this point, but on another hand, good, because now they are predominantly driving around in the vehicles that have higher survivability. So you much rather really see Bradleys and Strikers and M1 Abrams on there in that sense. Abandoned here, so we've got an M113, a number of Humvees destroyed and abandoned, 4 Humvees destroyed and abandoned there, and a Striker damaged, M113 as well. So, I mean, if you look at that, the APC category, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 vehicles, and only 1 is a Soviet-era vehicle, BTR there. The rest of these are Western provided, so 7/8 of the APC losses. 50% of IFEs, there's only a small number there, so it skews it a little bit, and tanks, maybe 1/5 of the tanks. So I think things are changing in that respect. Civilian vehicles, quite a lot taken out there for the Ukrainians, cars, vans and whatnot. And when we come to the Russian losses, we have a Su-57 damaged, and that's what we talked about yesterday. Actually, there are claims from the Ukrainians themselves, from the General Staff or associated spokesperson, I'm not sure, that they have possibly damaged 2 Su-57s. There's no evidence of that yet, but there is a claim that's out there. Estrella 10 damage, so that's a short-range air defense system, then electronic warfare destroyed, and then an awful lot of Starlinks. I wouldn't necessarily include those if it was my list, but it's not my list, so he can do what the hell he wants. Murom M, surveillance and comms, and another piece there. Recovery vehicle, another recovery vehicle lost, 2 more engineering vehicles. The Russians are losing quite a few of these engineering and recovery vehicles. Some of them are armored engineering vehicles, or AEVs, so they are actually military vehicles. Some of them will be just excavators and whatnot. Okay, artillery, nothing too serious there. Tanks, range of those, T-72s and ATs and whatnot. And then we have infantry fighting vehicles, so we've got BTRs, BMPs, normal state of affairs for the IFE category there, but losing quite a lot of them is worth realizing. And some APCs, trucks, civilian vehicles, so on and so forth. So quite a large number of pieces of equipment lost. But if you take out the Starlink, then it will equalize somewhat for the Russians. Right, moving on, we have just a few. Well, we've got quite a few bits to talk about. This is just a kind of random one that I caught. So this is talking about a particular city and then going wider into the region. So in a Soviet-Afghan war, 4 people died in 9 years from the city of Artyom. And in the war against Ukraine, in 2 years, 51 have died. So if you're just taking one city as an example, so town as a data point, then goodness me, the Ukrainian war is far deadlier than the Afghan one. Of course, the attrition in the Afghan war broadly led to Russia pulling out of there. It's got a much higher threshold for losses at the moment, possibly because a lot of the people who were protesting the war at the beginning have either been locked up or have run out the country. So you're left with a more pliable population. They appear to be, and probably a population that's far more, I don't know, they're more susceptible to Russian disinformation, because actually in the old days you only had terrestrial television, right? You didn't have the internet and whatnot, and so it was harder to get, although the internet makes it easier to disinform people, it's also easier to get true information. So it works both ways. Yeah, so I don't know whether that plays a role in why people haven't kicked off as much as, say, with the Afghan war. But anyway, 51 dead in 2 years from the city that has a population of 109,000 at the moment, and 72,000 in 1980 to 1989. So even if you took a quarter off that, you'd still have just an insanely large number of dead compared to the Afghan war. And then the question would be, well, can we extrapolate that to the whole losses? Would this be an anomalous scenario? So, for example, if you take a quarter off 51, that's broadly going to be 12. Yep. So we take about 12 off there. Then you're getting down to 4139 times, so 40, so it's times 10. So you could say, well, what were the deaths in Afghanistan? And can we multiply the deaths the known deaths in Afghanistan by 10 if this is an indication, if these figures are themselves accurate? So, yeah, I'm sure people are doing that kind of maths. Right, the GUR representative, as mentioned, said that there could have been 2 Su-57s that were damaged. There's data that continues to be clarified. There is preliminary information that there could be 2 Su-57 aircraft affected. There is also information about irreversible losses and wounded among the personnel of the occupiers, he said. Sky News reported yesterday that Ukrainian military sources say Ukraine's warplane hit a Russian command node in the first airstrike inside Russia, while another attack reportedly damaged a Russian large landing ship in the Azov Sea. Okay, we're going to be talking quite a bit about ships going forward, as in a little bit later. There could be an airstrike on a ship in the Azov Sea, which I think might be different to what we're going to learn about. Now, this idea that the Ukrainian warplane has fired a weapon at a target inside Russia for the first time was doing the rounds yesterday. According to Sky News, for the first time that happened, which would be in line with the ability to use HIMARS and to strike within Russian territory, but supposedly not allowed to use ATACMS. But if they can use airframes to fire into Russia, then that's really significant. Although John Ridge does say, I see we're forgetting when 2 Ukrainian Su-24Ms flew 80 kilometers into Russia and bombed an aviation factory in Kursk with 1,000-pound bombs in spring 2022. So if you remember right at the beginning of the war, goodness me, I've forgotten all about this. There were some helicopter strikes and some Russian jet strikes inside Russia that were really, really high-risk attacks inside Russia. So, yeah, it's worth remembering that that's not technically right, but certainly in the more recent iteration of the war, we haven't seen airplanes striking targets within Russian territory, and that happened yesterday. Now, it's probably this strike that was. With what, I don't know, but Russian ammunition storage in the Belgorod region has been hit and destroyed. You can clearly hear secondary explosions. It has to be noted that Russians positioned this military target in the middle of a civilian neighborhood. At least you can see normal houses in the foreground. Belgorod region is now more than ever in the crosshairs of long-range weapons, especially Western-made weapons, and it is all related to Russia's blunder in attacking Kharkiv region. It is a boomerang which resulted from Putin's latest miscalculation. We'll come on to that at the end of this video, but I think that's broadly correct. It's a big old fire going on there, and as mentioned, with secondary explosions. Also, someone in the video here, a woman, seems to casually ask, I wonder if soldiers lived there. So there are different claims about whether there were, what that strike was, ammunition depot, command and control node, troop accumulation here. And I presume this is the same strike, but it might not be. It could be a different one, but it looks like it could be the same one. A troop and equipment concentration of the Russian fascist invaders is burning in Rakitny in Belgorod region, says Michael McKay. So he seems to think troops are involved in that strike. Glasnost Gon says, with the fire seen from the road and rail line, the Russian base looks like to be the town of Valuki. So I don't know if this is different from one you've just seen. or whether this is the same one, different place mentioned, just 24 kilometers from the northern Ukrainian border. It's a sprawling invasion staging post, so you imagine there are troops there, filled with compounds and military supply trucks. It's a safe bet it will contain ammo, possibly in the new green roof building. So then, there are these different satellite images to show that you've got, a military compound there with an awful lot of kit. And there was a large roof certainly on fire in one of the videos that we saw there. So it could be what you see. I mean, could do with a few more strikes by looks of it if it's a large place. Now, this is a really interesting video from an American military woman who's in charge of air defense in the US, talking about how the Ukrainians are doing things that they've never done themselves, and also letting on that Patriots did do some damage to things that people weren't sure were Patriots or not. We're going to join what she says a little later.
Static sites and critical national infrastructure. Others are being moved around and doing some really historic things that I haven't seen in 22 years of being an air defender, and one of them is a SAMbush. What's come to be known as the surface-to-air ambush, surface-to-air missile ambush, and they're doing that with extremely mobile Patriot systems that were donated by the Germans, because the systems are all mounted on the trucks. So they're moving around, and they're using these types of systems, bringing them close to the flot, to gain and stretching the very, very edges of the kinematic capabilities of that system to engage the first A-50 C2 system back in January.
Okay, so what she's let on there is that, at least as far as she's concerned, the German Patriot system, which has got the advantage of being loaded onto trucks and being able to be driven around and used as she calls it, SAMbush, it's a term we've seen a number of times recently, that the German loaded Patriots can be used more effectively nearer to the front lines, nearer to the contact line. And not only do we see that, well, we think we've seen it in a number of places, but she is intimating that it was the Patriot that took down the A-50. So that's an AWAC style plane that, well, two of them were shot down in quick succession, weren't they? And there were claims that it was an S-200 launcher, but many people said, oh, surely it's a Patriot. And she's intimating it's a Patriot. Can't tell, don't know for sure whether she knows any more than anyone else, whether she's in a position of having that kind of intelligence. But throw that one into the mix, and I've long been calling for Patriots to be used more like that. In answer to that, seemingly to that video, Russians have been responding. Russians are responding to today's footage in which an American officer asserts that the January downing of a Russian A-50 aircraft was executed by a Patriot system. However, reactions have been muted as this red line has lost its novelty, it seems. As ever, these red lines get crossed and nothing happens. In other developments, Fighter Bomber reports that the effectiveness of guided bombs is declining. This is attributed to enhancements in electronic warfare systems on both sides, which significantly impair the accuracy of the bombs. Now, we'll just join that at the end, because actually this is interesting if it does refer to Russian systems or Russian use of the bomb. It's pretty average news. He says Ukrainians had a working guided module even before the war. I don't know why they didn't put it into that series. I also don't really understand why they decided to make them today, because there are mountains of ready-made glide bombs for them. Moreover, time for the modules is slowly running out. Electronic warfare on both sides is becoming more and more numerous. So it's referring to news that the Ukrainians are going to be making their own modular guided glide bomb kit and bomb and pylon or whatever it is to use on whichever aircraft they're talking about. He continues, it works against both our own and other people's satellite guidance systems, as a result of which the accuracy of the modules deteriorates to critical levels and will continue to deteriorate. The prospect lies in more advanced inertial navigation systems and correction systems that cannot be interfered with. So he's saying that both for ours and probably the JDAM he's referring to, there is an electronic warfare capability that is deteriorating our use to critical levels and their use. But this has kind of been understood with, say, the JDAMs. The French hammer bomb, not so much, because it has other ways of navigating that isn't just a GPS guidance. But for those that are just GPS or GLONASS guidance, then it appears that electronic warfare has deteriorated the accuracy to critical levels. That's really interesting. We haven't heard that about the Russians, but it could be that the accuracy of their glide bombs has recently been really badly affected, and one would hope that that is indeed the case. Here we see another thermobaric launcher destroyed. There was one on the list yesterday. It could be this one, as that blows up in typical fashion. Here we have a Panzerhowitzer 2000. Now, this could be the one that was on the lost list from yesterday. Andrew Perpetua says an interesting thing here, which has been noted previously about Russian videos. When you see them, they often cut away right at the end, so you don't know how much damage is actually done. Usually indicates that not too much damage has been done, so that's good news for this hit. But he says it looks like a Panzerhowitzer 2000 getting hit by Lancet. Unclear to the extent of the damage. It looks minimal. Wouldn't be a Russian video without obnoxious watermarks. Okay, you see that. Questionable editing, so it keeps cutting to different like views and different almost like looks like different drones. And then when you want the important drone feed to show you really what's going on, it cuts to a sudden massive drop in video quality. And you're like, what's going on there? Like, we had a really clear view before. Like, these two are clear views. And then for the one where it strikes, it cuts to a third worst view. And then it blows up and then, or doesn't blow up. The Lancet hits, you have a puff of smoke, and then it cuts. And you're like, oh, that's really frustrating. But that's what the Russians do more often than not. And I think it indicates that probably not as much damage was done as they would like. Otherwise, they'd definitely show you that. So fingers crossed for that Panzerhowitzer 2000. It's not too badly damaged. The Lancets have quite a variable success rate, and they can carry a variety, I think, of explosive warheads on board. So sometimes they do less damage than at other times because they either don't hit right or they've got a smaller warhead. Right, lots of Russia on fire going on. Not quite sure what this is all about. And as Trent Telenko says, not enough Russian male firefighters because the Russo-Ukrainian war. As I talked about previously, it used to be that Russian military conscripts would do the firefighting, particularly in the summer hot months of wildfires. And the last couple of years, they've been unable to do that, and fires have been raging. So a huge city dump, an area of more than 1,000 square meters, 5 hours ago, has been burning for many hours. Since almost all the firefighters died in Ukraine, only 50 people were sent to fight such a huge fire. Here are some photos a couple of hours ago, the Russian cemetery and fire. Here is all of Putin's Russia in one photo. Local channels write that the city is suffocating. So there's your Russian military graveyard by the looks of it, or certainly a graveyard. And then you've got a burning rubbish dump. Well, that must have carried on burning because that's it at night. Russia on fire in Novorossiysk. So this is near to the new home of the Black Sea Fleet. Locals are furious that the stinking landfill site has been burning all evening. It's next to a densely populated residential area. The mayor tries to convince the townsfolk that the blaze is localized. So that's happening. There's a massive fire in Moscow. Firefighters were also needed for one of the largest vehicle fires seen in Moscow for a year. Lorry crane completely burned out and completely blocked the third of the capital's ring roads. So more fires. Goodness knows why that started, and that's right in a critical area of Moscow. Looks like it's burning communication lines above it as well. And then we have this, and I'm not sure if this is a strike because it's reported that it might have been a drone strike. Reported to be a 2-story furniture shop burning. Eyewitnesses say smoke can be seen up to 5 kilometers away. This is a pretty big fire, this one, as you can see from the video there. It's a fairly large fire taking place. And yeah, there were claims, but I can't really verify this. Powerful fire in Samara. Local Telegram channels write about a drone attack. The area of the fire is 500 square kilometers. A furniture workshop was caught fire. So it could well have been a drone strike, but just don't know. But that's a fairly large fire in Samara there. Okay, moving on to distant strikes. And it was a very busy night, I think, last night, particularly over Crimea, although we don't have any details particularly. So Ukrainian missile strikes over Crimea last night. Airfields and military bases appear to have been targeted. Holding on for news, though, says Jay in Kyiv. Up to 6 to 8 explosions were heard in Krasnoperekopsk, Zhankoy districts and Pervomaisky, says the Ukrainian Review here. 4 powerful explosions were heard in Yevpatoria and Saki, so we've got air bases involved for sure, Zhankoy and Saki. There is an assumption about the arrival at a military facility near the village of Naumovka. 4 missiles strike a ground object near Yevpatoria. So goodness knows what has happened, but it seems fairly significant. When we look at sort of firms data, there were significant fires supposedly in 6 different places here. After the night attack on occupied Crimea, several fires can be observed on the firm's monitoring system. Looking at the exact locations, these are mostly open fields, which could indicate positions of air defense complexes. Let's wait for satellite footage. Nothing's come out as of yet. I'll check at the end of this video. A large fire at one of these places was at Gvardeskoye Air Base in Simferopol. Crimea has been recorded on firms. That's a wildfire NASA satellite imagery. It could be, or not satellite, but you get the point. It could be due to possible ATACMS fires by Ukraine overnight. And Russian sources report the Ukrainian ATACMS strikes on targets in Crimea last night, that 12 missiles were used, possibly hitting airfields of the Russian formations. So that's what the Russians themselves are claiming. And then when we move on, pro-Russian channel Rebar commented on the night attack on occupied Crimea. So they put their tuppence in, saying, after midnight, Ukrainian forces launched a missile attack on northwestern Crimea, firing at least 12 ATACMS missiles at from Mykolaiv region. The targeted areas include Chornomorska. So that's where Chornomorska is where the boats are often attacked on this northern shore of Crimea. Recently, the 2 USVs got over a boom and then took out a tug called the Saturn that's Chornomorska, Yevpatoria and Zhankoy, where air defense systems were activated. Is that Chornomorska? Where air defense systems were activated and explosions were heard. The exact targets of the attack are unknown, but they are likely included positions of the 31st Air Force and Air Defense Divisions. It's unclear if the attack hit its targets, but the absence of fires and secondary explosions suggests that either the attack was repelled or caused minimal damage. Of course, that goes against the idea that actually there was firms data to suggest that there were significant fires in these places. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Kazan airport temporarily does not accept or dispatch traffic, so that's a Russian airport not being used at the moment, so something might have happened there. And then we have a claim that there are actually 2 boats possibly damaged, 2 ships. A Russian media report a drone attack on a Russian tugboat and a barge in Taganrog Bay. So this is up north of the Sea of Azov. See if I can get that a map for you. Here we go. So this will be up, actually just to the right there, going up towards, this is Azov, that you get through the Kerch Strait here, and then up towards up towards past Berdyansk and towards Mariupol and onto Taganrog and Rostov-on-Don. So up there in Taganrog Bay, a barge, section 179, had damaged structures above the waterline, and the windows of the tugboat engineer Smirnov were broken, according to Russian telegram channels. Taganrog Bay is located in the northeastern part of the Sea of Azov. So you've got stuff falling off this boat here. Claims about the drones being sea drones, but then stuff falling off. I don't quite know the damage there, and especially getting past the Kerch Bridge. I don't know how easy it is for drones to do that. Nonetheless, that's a claim that happened there. Now, talking about the Su-57s, That was what struck, possibly, definitely one was damaged, possibly two the other day at Akhtubinsk Air Base, carried out by, quote, invisible drones that cannot be shot down by any air defense system in the world, according to Russians. So Russian sources are really moaning about this. I personally think this is just crappy drones have got through. Not crappy, I mean, they've obviously done a good job, but they're not exactly invisible. They've got through because there are no air defenses. It's not that the air defenses can't shoot them down, it's you don't have any, and that's how weak you are behind behind the front lines. It's going deep into Russian territory. There are just no air defenses, and so they get through and cause an explosion and cause damage to a Su-57. It says here Su-57 two air defense systems, Pantsir S-1 and S-300, were damaged or destroyed. Be interesting if that was also those were also damaged at an air base. These drones being able to get through undetected by the those air defense systems. So it could be that they're made of balsa wood or something and can't be detected by air defense. But yeah, the enemy hit the airfield at Akhtubinsk with invisible drones. Unfortunately, not only the Su-57 was hit, according to our sources, General Staff and the Aerospace Forces, enemy drones hit a fighter and two air defense systems in Akhtubinsk, Pantsir S-1 and S-300. One installation is almost completely destroyed, the other may be repaired. That's super important, and it means that that air base is now open to being struck again, you would have thought. If that's happened, that is really, really significant. And it was kind of hinted at by your man who said that there is preliminary information that two Su-57s and also information about irreversible losses and wounded among the personnel of the occupiers. But yeah, obviously more damage done than just those aircraft. Really good news there. Now, Trentselenko says Russian air defense is claiming a lawnmower-class engine propeller drone like the Lyuty is invisible. The Lyuty is only invisible if you don't have enough low-altitude radar coverage, because the radars that did this role died in Ukraine without replacement. So you might have the S-300 there, you might have a Pantsir there, but if this flies low enough, then it's very difficult to detect it. And indeed, when we saw people shooting at it with small arms fire, that's really very low, and if your radar systems can only spot that very late, then, or even not at all, it means that you can have really good systems, but they ain't going to do jack against these lawnmowers with wings. I thought this was quite a revealing picture here. This is what the side of a command vehicle of the commander of an anti-aircraft missile unit, Lieutenant Colonel Kirilo Peretyakko, looks like. Together with his team, they've already destroyed 139 targets. So you can see almost entirely drones and missiles there. Well, it looks entirely drones and missiles. I can't see any airplanes on that, but that's incredibly impressive. 139 targets taken down. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. So 99-year-old D-Day veteran Alec Penston, this is a UK D-Day veteran, attempted to return his Russian Medal of Ushakov for bravery to Moscow after Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Disgusted by Putin's actions, so he obviously for some reason got a medal from the Russians after the Second World War. He said, I want it taken off this earth. It will be a pleasure when I know that he's dead. I want Putin taken off this earth. Absolutely right there. Good on you, mate. Just the right kind of approach in my books. Now, here we have a dog. This is Vazia, or was Vazia, a dog who served with the Ukrainian military, has died. He chewed off his paw to get out of a trap. The dog of the Cane Corso breed died due to a serious illness, so died of natural causes. He had been serving with the Ukrainian military in the Donbass since 2016. Wow, 8 years of service. During the service, Vazia got tangled in the wire near the militants' positions. The scouts planned to evacuate the dog. However, he soon returned on his own. As it turned out, the dog chewed off his paw to get out. The dog Vazia was given a prosthesis in Poland. After rehabilitation, he returned to Ukraine to his owners. Legend. Look at the way he's looking there, on the lookout. I love it. Sad, but still kind of heartwarming. Now, people reporting that the Kerch Railway Bridge is not being used for Russian military logistics just got kicked in the teeth by the reality to the tune of, okay, so 2 locomotives, 13 tank cars, 20 to 25 boxcars, 5 to 10 flat cars, and 5 to 10 covered hoppers. So this is, and I reported this, that the railway hasn't been used to its full capacity, and I still don't know whether this is to its full capacity or whether they have just made it usable at the moment, but certainly it is being used to transport railway cargo there, military cargo by the looks of it. Well, yes, probably. I don't know if it's military cargo, but it certainly is being used to some degree. And Jason J. Smart here reports that these are Russian hackers seeking the overthrow of the Putin regime. They have had great success in striking government targets in Russia and Belarus. They are promising big news soon. This is really good. This is kind of stuff that you want to see happening. This is Anonymous. So Anonymous are the famous hacktivists, but they appear to have Operation Russia. We are and will be everywhere there is. Our team joined the Anonymous of Op Russia. For 18 hours, we now have down the terror propagandists of eng.belter by and atom.belter.by. I don't know what any of that means. But anyway, we will make worse. Yes, expect us until the terrorists are gone. Putin must fall. Russia must be free. So obviously English is not their first language yet, but you get the point, is that these guys are joining in the cyber attacks on Russia and possibly Belarus as well. Incredibly important there. It'd be great if they have some great success, as they are promising. Russian assault on Kharkiv has stalled out as Ukrainians fire across the border, says Jake Sullivan. So he's announced that the United States will continue to support Ukraine in holding the line and pushing back against the aggressing Russian forces. Now, say what you like about Jake Sullivan, whatever. The point here is that the US is officially recognizing that the Russian attack across the border, the offensive at Kharkiv, has sputtered to a halt. And I think that's really big news. And we need to really recognize this. I've been talking about this a lot recently, saying that, do you know what? It's been an operational disaster. Andrew Perpetua casts his opinion. Russia's made a lot of pretty serious blunders in this war, most of all starting it at all. But them attacking Kharkiv is one of the worst. First, from a military perspective, it served no purpose at all. It was a complete waste of resources. That distracted Russia from all of its goals and stands to give Russia no lasting benefit. Exactly what I've been saying since this thing started. When it started, I said, I can't see the sense of this. I can't see it succeeding. It's only going to make their own position worse. And do you know what? Like, it's quite nice to be right about stuff that I'm no real expert in. Second, the mission completely failed and makes Russia look weaker than it was in over a year. I totally agree. Third, the attack boosted the morale of Ukrainian troops at a time when the morale was really suffering. Fourth, they're doubling down on the idiocy with some idea that if they just put more resources in, they can achieve their goals. It's exactly what I said as well. It's like definition of insanity is doing the same thing but expecting different results. They're doubling down, they're piling in reinforcements, and they're just getting their asses whooped there, it appears. So even if they achieve, but like I said, their goals serve no purpose and have no value. So even if they achieve them, it's a waste of resources. And second, they are now forced to draw resources from other areas to reinforce their failure. People are making too much of that. Last point, by the way, I don't think Russia is pulling combat units from other areas to bring to Kharkiv, but maybe reserves, or perhaps they are reshuffling which reserves are in which location. It's all very stupid, and I hope Russia continues to do things this stupid. Absolutely agree with this, and it's really good news that it has failed so badly. Oh good, something has come out just as I'm finishing the video. There has been a release by the General Staff concerning those strikes on Crimea, and it looks good. So this is not verified, but it is what the General Staff that are officially saying. So this is the message from the Ukrainians themselves. Defense Forces of Ukraine hit anti-aircraft missile systems of the Russian Federation in the temporarily occupied Crimea tonight. The Defense Forces of Ukraine successfully struck one S-400 anti-aircraft missile division. So that's the very best air defense system of the occupiers in the Jankoy area, as well as two enemy S-300 anti-aircraft missile divisions in Chornomorsk and Yevpatoria. None of our launched missiles was intercepted by the enemy's highly effective anti-aircraft defense. Ow, trolling there. So not a single missile was intercepted. In particular, in the specified areas after strikes by Ukrainian rocket launchers, the immediate shutdown of the radars of the C-300, C-400 complexes, or S-300, S-400s, was recorded. In addition, further detonation of ammunition. I presume the immediate shutdown means that they didn't shut them down, but they might have shut them down so they didn't give a footprint because the launchers were hit, or that could mean that they were taken out, the radars were themselves taken out. In addition, further detonation of ammunition was noted at all three areas at the starting positions of the anti-aircraft missile divisions of the Russian Federation. Thanks to the successful combat work of the defense forces, the air defense of the Russian invaders in the Ukrainian Crimea suffered significant losses. We continue to destroy the enemy. This is massive. I was thinking the other day about how the destruction of air defences right across Crimea could facilitate, and I know this is like real wishful thinking, but it could facilitate an amphibious and aerial landing. So if you have no air defences around here, if you look at where they're taking out the air defences, you continue doing that kind of stuff for 3 or 4 months, right? And totally taking out Crimean critical military infrastructure so it becomes effectively blind, and do that in Kherson as well. And then could you realistically land and from an amphibious attack and from paratroopers and Marines, could you land them in Crimea and actually get a presence there and then cause the Russians to absolutely panic? Or would that just be completely suicidal? I don't know. It's just really interesting that they are definitely hitting these air defense systems systematically. To lose another three, if that's true, overnight, this is incredible. Like, Russia is getting their air defense systems rinsed at the moment, and I think this can only be exceptionally good news for Ukraine. Anyway, I'll leave you with that positive thought. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.